Hello, all of my history-loving friends. I am Madam Morbid. I am your guide on any number of historical adventures. And today I am in Dallas, Texas, following the childhood footsteps of Bonnie and Clyde. Bonnie was born in Rowena, Texas. Bonnie was the third child born to Charles Parker and Emma Krause. She was born in 1910. She had a little brother who died as an infant, possibly of SIDS. I don't think anyone really knows. Her older brother's name was Hubert, but everybody called him Buster. Then Bonnie was born, and then her sister Billie Jean was born in 1912. And when she was 4 years old, her father, who was a bricklayer, died. I'm not sure of what. I think all that's really known about it is that he died suddenly. After the death of her husband, Charles, Emma moved her family to Cement City to live with her mother, who was also a widow. This is where Clyde was living as well, although, as we discussed in the last video, Clyde was living by the Trinity River in a transient camp. Their family was never quite that destitute. Emma, her mother, found a job in a factory. In 1930, Emma is listed as working as a seamstress at an overall company. And Bonnie was a very bright, precocious child. This is Bonnie Parker's elementary school. It's a really cool castle-looking school. It's not very big. She went to elementary school here at least 2 or 3 years, I think. Was a good student. She was bright. She was a very creative person. She wanted to be an actress, and she was in plays, and evidently she was in a play here and she was in blackface. I forget what character she was pretending to be, but a little boy did something mean to her on stage. She started to cry, and that makeup was running down her face, and she went after the kid. The crowd started laughing, and suddenly she realized, hey, I can get some attention for this in a good way. She started performing and doing cartwheels. She loved attention. I think some of her going with Clyde was part of that. She loved the publicity. She loved being famous, even if it wasn't for a good thing. She knew she would never be a movie star, no matter how much she dreamed of it. If you can't be famous, then be infamous. Bonnie was a tiny woman. She was only 4'10" and I bet she probably never even weighed 100 pounds in her whole entire life. So I bet she was the cutest little girl. She probably was teeny tiny even for a child. She had curly blonde hair, and sounds like she was a Spitfire from basically birth. She had no qualms about getting into fights, usually minor stuff, you know, but she would stand up for herself. And even as an adult, when her and Clyde would fight, if he hit her, she would just come right back at him. It wasn't like he was abusive. She'd give it just as good as he gave. I feel like he considered her an equal, which is kind of unusual for that day and time. And when she got old enough, one of the things women kind of had to do is, you know, look for a husband who can support you. And so she married this young kid, Roy Thornton. You know, he was tall, he was handsome, he had a car. What she didn't know is he had stolen that car, but it seemed like maybe he could take care of her, and as far as she was concerned, she thought she was in love. And they got married when she was 15 years old. It didn't take long for him to disappear. He basically just abandoned her, and after a while she realized he's not coming back, and even if he did, I don't think I really want him back. Bonnie had a lot of talents. She was the smartest girl in her school. She won a spelling bee. She was very theatrical. She loved to sing, to dance. She was a writer. But a girl from Cement City had zero chance of ever being discovered. No one from Hollywood was going to come to Cement City looking for prospective actresses. Publishers were not going to consider a talented girl from the slums of Dallas for publication. It's the same situation like with Clyde. When you are at the bottom of the social ladder, you stay at the bottom of the social ladder. Her only options were waitressing, factory work, possibly clerical work. And that's it. And like Clyde, for Bonnie, that just wasn't good enough. And when Roy left her for the third time and disappeared, she finally realized, I've got to find something to support myself. He's not coming back. She thought he had probably left her for another woman. Either way, she made the decision, I don't care. Even if he comes back, I don't want him back. And that's when she found a job at Hargrave's Cafe. And when he finally came back over a year after disappearing, she pretty much said, I am done with you. And she absolutely meant it. She had her own income now. Hargrave's was in a pretty good neighborhood. And because she was really friendly and outgoing, that would really help her in getting tips, because waitresses only made $3 or $4 a week, and then everything else you depended on tips. And at this time, we're talking about people would leave you pennies. If you got a dime, you really had a big spender. In January 1928, Bonnie took a job here at Hargreaves Cafe. She worked here until spring of 29. This is after she broke up with her husband, Roy. And there's stories that she used to go out the back and she would holler over to the women that worked at the laundry across the street. And they would chat and be friendly, and she would take their orders, and then she would come in and they would make the food, and then she would take it back over to the ladies because they couldn't stop their jobs to leave and go get their food. And the inside has totally changed on this building, and so it's hard to imagine what it might have looked like then. And the outside is pretty rough looking as well. I have no idea what they have planned for this building. Right now it's the only one that still stands that Bonnie used to work as a waitress in. There are a couple more nearby here, and there are some businesses also nearby where Clyde worked for a while. None of those buildings are recognizable, and in some cases they are no longer standing. After Hargraves, Bonnie went to work at another cafe called Marco's. Marco's was downtown Dallas. It was near the courthouse. She would have been serving more important people, more affluent people, lawyers, judges, professionals. But her boss, this is November 29, so this is exactly the same month as when Buck got arrested and Clyde almost got caught. So this is about a month after the crash. Her boss at Marco's told Emma that he was possibly going to have to fire Bonnie because she was so tender-hearted. She kept giving people food for free. She would not send people away hungry just because they were poor. Now, despite this threat, he never acted on that, and she never stopped giving food to hungry people. But Marco's ended up closing because of the Depression. She knew it was coming. Everybody knew it would happen eventually. People just didn't know when it would be their turn to get canned. A few things that Bonnie absolutely loved. She loved to go to the movies. She loved to, of course, imagine herself as a movie star in Hollywood. Didn't we all when we were that age? She wanted to be like a movie star. I think everybody has probably seen that glamour shot. So it was the 1930s equivalent of a glamour shot. I think that's how she saw herself. She wore a lot of makeup, and she always dressed really, really nice. Again, that's something her and Clyde had in common. He liked to dress nice as well. Even when they were living on the run and living in their car, that was still something she really strove for. And it's really interesting. Some people I have talked to in Joplin, when I was doing the Joplin episode, I had multiple people telling me how unattractive Bonnie was. That in her physical appearance, she was not an attractive woman, but she would compensate for it by dressing super nice and by really fixing herself up with makeup. And I think you can see that in some of the photographs. You can tell that she's really wearing the lipstick heavy. And it actually looks like in some cases that she has used lip liner to maybe even accentuate her lips where they actually aren't, doing that kind of Clara Bow pucker. It looks like her lips were super thin. I don't see her as unattractive when I look at photographs of her, though. So I'm really not understanding this unless she just really looked different in person. I don't know. I also wonder if some people's opinions were just colored by judgment of her character. Like, oh, I can't view this woman as attractive. Tom Purcell is one of those people. He was the police officer kidnapped in Springfield. He said Clyde was an attractive guy, but he thought Bonnie was very unattractive. The museum director at the Joplin Museum told me that his grandmother told him that Bonnie was super unattractive. I don't know. I don't see that in photographs of her at all. Because then there's other people like Ted Hinton, who said when she was serving him at Marco's that she was extremely attractive and that he had a crush on her. And the guy that embalmed her said that she was a very beautiful woman, even in death. Beauty is subjective, but she looks pretty to me. And makeup was kind of new. I mean, it was pretty widespread, I think, but you still had the older people who were viewed makeup as, I think at first, Clyde's mother wasn't super excited about the fact that Clyde's new girlfriend really liked the makeup. She also was absolutely crazy about Jimmie Rodgers and his music. It was interesting. I found this song of his called Daddy and Home, and it reminds me of Bonnie and Clyde in that they always came home no matter how much trouble they were in. And it's really sad, she actually outlived Jimmie Rodgers. He died of tuberculosis in 1933. Tuberculosis was such a killer back then, and it actually also would kill her mother in the 40s. Bonnie was also a chain smoker. She had to have Camels, as she would just smoke constantly. That was one of the things that Tom Purcell, again, the police officer they kidnapped, he complained that Bonnie smoked all of his cigarettes. I didn't actually go to this location, but the house where Bonnie and Clyde met stood on Cockrell Street on the site of the Dallas Police Headquarters. That's just super ironic. And actually, I think Clyde would find that funny, to be honest with you. In the wake of Buck being arrested, Clyde was pretty down in the dumps. At first, he thought Buck was dead. He thought he had literally abandoned his brother to being shot to death by the police. So he was really happy to find out that he was just wounded and not seriously. It's about 5 weeks after this happened, January 5th, 1930. Clyde has started hanging out with better friends. By better, I mean better examples who are less likely to get him into trouble. One of those people was Clarence Clay. Bonnie's brother, Buster, had married Clarence Clay's sister. They were throwing a party at their house. The party happened at 105 Herbert Street. It was only a few blocks from the camp. Bonnie, of course, went because of her brother. So when this party comes about in January of 1930, she's pretty low too. She's lost her job. She can't find another one. They come to this party and a lot of people were invited to this. And Bonnie saw Clyde and they were drawn to each other instantly. She was tiny. Clyde, who had always kind of worried about his height, he was just under 5'6". She was 4'11". She also had the same drive to get out of poverty and to rise above her social standing, just like Clyde did. She also worshipped him. She would just hang all over him. That was great for his self-esteem, which at that time was pretty low. Bonnie's mom said that she had never known Bonnie to be as worshipful of Roy as she was about Clyde. If there's one thing that I think draws just about everybody to their story, is that love story. I mean, that had to have been absolute, real and true love. That she was willing to stick with him no matter what he had done and to die beside him because she would rather do that than live without him. She had so many opportunities to walk away and she wouldn't do it. There's just something amazing about that. And I don't think there's a man on earth I would ever make that decision about. But then again, I live in the 21st century. I have a lot more options as a woman than Bonnie Parker ever did. I can go out and get a college education. I can go out and get a job that I'm qualified for, no matter where I came from in life. I can support myself. I have that capability. These are things that were not open to Bonnie. And I think we all have to keep that in mind when we're thinking about these people who turned to crime during the Great Depression. I've covered a lot of their exploits after this, but for this episode, we're going to stop where they meet. And you will find a lot of their crimes and things they went through together on this channel in my Bonnie and Clyde playlist. I will be doing more Bonnie and Clyde. There's lots more I still haven't covered. I hope you've enjoyed this little journey through the childhood of Bonnie, and I hope to see you next time for another Bonnie and Clyde adventure. Don't forget to like and subscribe, please. If you made it to the end, you probably like the kind of stuff I do. I'll see you next time.